This is a story about 3 instructional design models. The Kemp, ADDIE, and Nurk and Gustafson models have influenced instructional design for over 45 years. Our story begins with a man named Gerald Kemp. Gerald Kemp was a World War II veteran. He served in the U.S. Army Corps 65th Airways and Air Communications Service Group from 1943 until 1947. He earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Chemistry from the University of Florida in 1942, a Master's of Science degree from the University of Miami in 1952, and a doctoral degree in Instructional Technology from Indiana University in 1956. He was a high school science teacher. He wrote the book Instructional Design, A Plan for Unit and Course Development in 1971. He retired from the Air Force Reserves in 1981. He was a professor at San Jose State University and a leader in the field of instructional design. It is likely that Kemp influenced the IPISD, ADDIE, and Nurk and Gustafson instructional design models. So what influenced Kemp?
I love the idea of not just talking, as I had teachers would say to me once in a while, that I remember a history teacher teaching a course to the students on the revolutionary days as America was forming. And I said, hey, there's a new film in the library on the revolution. Oh, she says, that sounds interesting. She says, well, as soon as I get done my lecture, I'll consider using it. And I said to myself, wouldn't it be good for her to use that before the lecture so the students would know more what this subject is about rather than go through the verbal work that she's doing in her lecture? And that way, and I became more interested in helping teachers to look at the contributions that audiovisual made. So that's where I got started. I took my master's degree at the University of Miami in Florida, and there was one course on audiovisual education, and it was a course that was mainly offered by the salesmen from the film projectors and slide projector companies for the students there, and I learned how to run the projectors then that way. But also the interesting thing was that there was a textbook used in the course, and it was a book some of you may be familiar with from a long distance. It was done in the 1940s, 46. It's Edgar Dale, Audiovisual Methods of Teaching. And this is really a fascinating thing to read, even today, to look at this. I marked one page in here, which is what's called the cone of experience. Moving from the most communicative forms of technology, down at the bottom, direct purposeful experiences, contrived experience, dramatic participation, where you're all doing things, demonstrations, field trips, exhibits, and then those are the doing, and then on the second level are the observing, and these are with motion pictures, radio and recordings. Remember, this was written in 1946. Visual symbols, and then there's the top of it, which is the symbolizing, the verbal symbols, the voice, and so forth. So we're going from direct experiences to the media, which is an intermediate type experience, to the verbal levels dealing in lectures and so forth. And Edgar Dale just did a great thing, and he was at Ohio State, and I admired him for many ways and kept in touch with him later on because he made me think about this field in new ways. So that's how I got started in the profession.
That's wonderful. And tell us about the primary focus of your work during your career.
Well, when I started working in the audiovisual field, it interested me greatly because it was learning things that you could participate in. It wasn't a textbook, particularly verbal learning, at the top of the Dale cone in that sense at all. It was hands-on in a large extent. And I had experiences as a young kid going to a boys' summer camp in Connecticut. And it was fascinating to me because the director was just a very good teacher, but his teaching was that you, the student, had to be able to do it or discuss it or understand it and illustrate that. And we would do things about learning about plants and the different leaves on trees and things. And we would have to identify and relate them ourselves rather than just hearing about them. And that started me out thinking about, if you're in education, you would want the student to be a participatory resource in the process of learning rather than sitting back and verbalizing about it, which is how it so often.
So far, we've learned about Dr. Gerald Kemp, who wrote a book about instructional design in 1971. We're going to put a pin in that and revisit it in 1994. In the meantime, we're going to talk about IPISD and ADDIE. IPISD and ADDIE were written by Branson, Wagner, and Rayner while teaching at Florida State University to meet the needs of the U.S. Army Training Command. They influenced ADDIE. IPISD stands for Inter-Service Procedures for Instructional Systems Development. The Task 5 final report was written in 1977 and included 5 volumes: Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Control. This led to the ADDIE model, which was named by Dr. Russell Watson in 1981. ADDIE stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Evaluation. The model was created by the Center for Educational Technology at Florida State University for the United States Army in 1975, 4 years after Gerald Kemp wrote Instructional Design, a Plan for Unit and Course Development. The model was nearly identical to the IPISD and ADDIE 5-phase model written by Branson, Wagner, and Rayner in 1977, also known as the 5-step approach. For decades, the military was a leader in training and learning. Why was this? Russell Watson is quoted as saying, "As defense machinery was becoming more and more sophisticated, the educational background of entry-level soldiers was becoming lower and lower. The political solution to this problem was in the form of a systems approach to training." Aside from defense machinery becoming more and more sophisticated, I believe that the military was also motivated by the Cold War, which lasted from 1947 until 1991, and the United States' desire for dominance over the Soviet Union. ADDIE began as a monodirectional and linear model. It had 5 phases, and it wasn't even called ADDIE. It was called ADDIE because phase 5 was evaluation and control. In 1981, Dr. Russell Watson revised ADDIE, removing control. The 5 stages are the same otherwise. Some of the steps have been modified. ADDIE is not just another waterfall model. Dr. Russell Watson said, "The 5 phases of ISD are analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation and control." The first four are sequential in nature, but the evaluation and control phase is a continuous process that is conducted in conjunction with all of the others. The 1980s proved that ADDIE can be flexible. Contrary to popular belief, ADDIE is now an iterative model where formative evaluation occurs throughout the instructional design process. ADDIE's phases can be performed in a nonlinear, iterative way. This model came from a U.S. Army manual in 1984. It said, "As the model shows, all parts are interrelated. Changes which occur during one step of the model may affect the other four steps. In the ISD process, nothing is done in isolation, nor is all done in a linear fashion. Activities of various phases may be accomplished concurrently." And so we see the ADDIE model moving away from a waterfall design into a non-linear design. 1986 brought us the Nurk and Gustafson instructional design model. It was developed by Frederick G. Nurk, an instructional design book author, and Kent L. Gustafson, a UGA professor. Together, they co-authored Instructional Technology: A Systematic Approach to Education. This model was designed to be used by both experts and beginners. It consisted of three key stages: problem determination, design, and development. The first stage of the Nurk and Gustafson model is problem determination. It consists of identifying problems that can include the learner's entry-level skills and instructional goals. The instructional designer conducts a needs assessment, then looks at the learner's entry-level skills and instructional goals before organizing this information, which gives the instructional designer a strong foundation to work from. The second stage of the Nurk and Gustafson model is the design stage. This stage focuses on developing instructional objectives, then specifying strategies and media. This stage builds upon information in the problem determination stage regarding the instructional goals and objectives and student needs. The third and final stage of the Nurk and Gustafson instructional design model is the development stage. During this stage, the instructional designer develops or selects appropriate materials tailored to meet instructional problems and objectives that were identified in phases 1 and 2. An instructional prototype and materials may be tested, analyzed, and revised. Then instruction is implemented. Unlike the iterative models, the K&G model is linear, and this is the only stage where revision occurs. Remember how our instructional design journey started in 1971 with Dr. Gerald Kemp, and we said we'd put a pin in it? Fast forward to 1994, and we get the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross instructional design model, which evolved from the book Instructional Design: A Plan for Unit and Course Development, written by Gerald E. Kemp in 1971. The model was officially described in the book Designing Effective Instruction by Kemp, Morrison, and Ross in 1994. The model focuses on the individual, is good for small or large groups, and is classroom-oriented. Being nonlinear, revision is an ongoing process. The model is flexible and has no specific starting points. You can even skip steps. You might notice the oval shape of the model. This shape conveys that the instructional design process is a continuous cycle. The model is iterative, similar to more recent versions of the ADDIE model. Within the oval, you have 9 interdependent core elements representing the steps in instructional design. For step 1, you identify instructional problems and determine goals. For step 2, you identify learner characteristics and needs that will influence planning. For step 3, task analysis, you determine the knowledge and procedures that are needed to help the learner master the objectives while eliminating extraneous content. For step 4, you determine the instructional objectives, which focus on outcomes, the things the learner will be able to do. Step 5, content sequencing, you determine the order in which to present materials. For step 6, you focus on the best way for content to be presented so that learners can master the objectives. For step 7, you design the message. Those are the pictures and words you will use to communicate with learners. Step 8 is instructional delivery. For step 9, you develop evaluation instruments that will be used to assess mastery of content and goals. Remember that you can start anywhere within this model and that you can even skip steps. Before 1975, ADDIE was known as SAT, Systems Approach to Training, or ISD, Instructional Systems Design. In 1995, that's just 1 year after Kemp published his model, Michael Schlegel is the first to use the acronym ADDIE in a Handbook of Instructional and Training Program Design. ADDIE stands for Analyze, Design, Develop, Implement, and Evaluate. When studying instructional design, you will notice an increasing number of interpretations of ADDIE. In 2002, Thomas, Mitchell, and Joseph proposed adding the third dimension of culture to the ADDIE model, making it three-dimensional. This third dimension would consist of 3 parameters: interaction, introspection, and intention. Intention is the reflection on cultural sensitivity. Interaction is a constructivist approach where the designer, subject matter expert, and end user participate collaboratively. Introspection is considering your own thoughts, attitudes, feelings towards, and beliefs about other cultures. This diagram shows a 2011 iteration of ADDIE from the United States Army. ADDIE continues to evolve and be interpreted in different ways. Here is a nonlinear, iterative model where formative evaluation is ongoing. Here we have a 2017 U.S. Army version of ADDIE where evaluation is ongoing and the model is cyclical. When comparing instructional design models, you will notice that they all start with problem identification. The Kemp, Morrison, and Ross model is based on Kemp's 1971 book, Instructional Design, A Plan for Unit and Course Development. It has 9 interdependent course elements. This model focuses on the individual. It is nonlinear. Evaluation is ongoing. It is easy to use in the classroom, relatively inexpensive to implement. Revision is ongoing, and it's good for small or large projects. The ADDIE model was based on the IPISD Task 5 final report written by Branson, Wagner, and Rayner while they were teaching at FSU to meet the needs of the U.S. Army Training Command Center. ADDIE was created by the Center for Educational Technology at Florida State University for the U.S. Army in the 1970s. It has 5 phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. It started to be linear, but evolved to be cyclic and iterative. The steps may now happen concurrently. Revision is ongoing. Formative evaluation is ongoing. This model is best for large projects, but it can be used for small projects. The Nurk and Gustafson model was developed by Frederick G. Nurk, an instructional design book author, and Kent L. Gustafson, a UGA professor, in 1986. It consists of 3 key phases: problem determination, design, and development. The designer can iterate between the steps within the stages. This model is both learner-centered and goal-oriented. It is best suited for classroom lessons and e-learning. It is relatively inexpensive to implement, similar to the Kemp model. It was designed to be used by experts and beginners. The difference between this model and other models is that it misses the steps of revision and evaluation in the first 2 of 3 steps. The most important thing to remember about instructional design models is to use the one that is right for you and to adjust it however you see fit. Thank you for listening. None of this presentation would have been possible without all of this fabulous research from the field.